Okay. And can you just state your name and your organizational affiliation?
Chad Woodburn, and where I currently work now, or
Yeah.
I work for the American Legion state headquarters here in Illinois, so that's my full-time job.
Okay. And then biographical details. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Frankfurt, Germany in April of '72.
Okay. And who were your parents, and were their occupations?
My father is Terry Woodburn. He retired as lieutenant colonel from the Army. He retired from the American Legion state headquarters here in Illinois, and then he passed away that was 2 years ago, I guess. And then my mom, Kathy Woodburn, and she lives in Brownsburg currently.
Okay. So were you born on a military base
Yes.
in Frankfurt?
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'm an Army brat.
Yeah. So your dad was Army, but you did Marines and Air Force?
And Army, actually.
Oh, and Army.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I hit 3 of the 5 services.
Oh, not bad. And what were you doing before you entered the service?
High school.
Okay, just straight out of high school?
I graduated high school early and went right to Marine Corps after that.
Okay, it's the same thing my brother did.
Yep.
Took like 3 months off and then...
No, so I graduated, was supposed to graduate in May of '90 and graduated in December of '89. And then I had about a month and a half before I went to boot camp.
Oh, wow. Did you do boot camp in North Carolina or
No,
South Carolina?
I actually went to San Diego.
Oh, okay. The other one?
Yeah, we lived in Indiana, and oddly enough, you would figure that Indiana being more towards the East Coast, you would go to Parris Island.
Yes.
And I just was Indianapolis was just in the cutoff of going to San Diego for whatever reason, so that's where I ended up going.
Okay. I thought it was by the Mississippi.
Well, that would make sense, but back then it was, for some reason, the Indianapolis was one of the cutoff areas for San Diego, so that's where I ended up going. So.
Did you like it?
I mean, you really don't like boot camp per se,
Yeah.
but it was good for me at the time. I wasn't ready for college. I was just ready to get out of the house.
Yeah.
And so Marine Corps boot camp was good for me. It made me grow up real quick. I actually turned 18 at boot camp.
Really?
Yeah, so that was fun.
Fun 18th birthday?
Yes,
Sure.
great 18th birthday.
Yeah. It seems like what everyone says is boot camp makes you grow up pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't really matter what service. I mean, any service that you go to, the basic training is gonna help you grow and learn. But as strict as Marine Corps boot camp is, and very in your face, literally in some cases, you learn a lot, and especially for someone of a young age to go in. Your leadership and just the way you learn things, I think it's really good for a young person.
Okay. How does it work when you switch branches? Do you have to do multiple boot camps? Or
No.
You just go straight to being an officer? Or?
Well, you going from the Marine Corps to other services, you don't have to go to the boot camp. The other services recognize, I guess is probably the right word, the intensity of Marine Corps boot camp. So they pretty much just pass you on and you just go to whatever job school you're transferring into. Now, if you want to go from another service into the Marines, you have to go through their boot camp regardless. The Marine Corps is very much, you earn the title. You don't just, and it's nothing bad against any of the other services, but it's the Marine Corps way. And So to go from the Air Force into the Marine Corps, you have to go through boot camp, and you earn the title just like everybody else does.
Okay. Yeah, you sound just like my brother. I was just saying, like, Marines are pretty serious. I mean, everything else is great. Marines are pretty serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going off script.
That's all right.
So, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted, yeah.
Okay. Why did you choose that specific branch?
The biggest thing, or not, I guess not the biggest thing, the first thing that kind of drew me to the Marines was the uniform, the dress blues. Sharpest dress uniform of any service. So that was the big thing. The other thing was the leadership that I knew I was going to get. I knew I was going to earn that title. It wasn't just going to be given to me. I wasn't just going to graduate through. I was going to have to earn something, and that meant a huge amount as well. So it's just what I went with.
Okay. I've never heard anyone say dress before for the reason. What happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Back then in late 80s, early 90s, obviously you didn't have the internet. And so you really, you could look at books, the recruiters told you this is what you're going to expect, that kind of thing. So you had a vague idea of what you were going into. I remember getting off the bus and it's automatic. Drill instructor comes on the bus and starts yelling and screaming, giving you orders. And with the Marines, whether it be Paris Island or San Diego, the first thing that really sticks in your mind are the yellow footprints. You get off the bus and they're telling you to get on these footprints, and looking back, at that point you're just so scared that you don't know what's going on. But looking back, you're staying on the same footprints of other Marines from throughout history, and so I remember staying on the footprints, and they're telling you briefly about the Uniform Code of Military Justice and a few other things, and then you go in and you get your only phone call, or your first phone call really there at boot camp, not the only one, but basically telling your parents or whoever that you've made it there, and whoever will hear from you in a couple weeks because of a letter. And I remember calling my dad and I just was saying, Dad, I'm scared. I don't know what I got myself into. And he's like, you'll make it. And hung up the phone, and I don't remember that first week. The first couple days, they actually keep you up for, I think it's 36 hours. One is to try and disorient you a little bit. And then the other is just they're packing so much. You go through your in-processing paperwork, you get your medical, all your shots and all that stuff. So it's a lot of stuff packed in. So that first week, I've got no recollection of. But yeah, I was definitely scared going in there. And then you get in the routine quickly, and it's just a matter of doing what you're told when you're told to do it, and it's definitely a kick in the butt, that's for sure.
Only imagine. Do you recall your instructors, and if so, what were they like?
Oh yeah, my senior drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Williams, Sergeant Meekins, which I've got a funny story about him, and then Staff Sergeant Gilbreth. He was Marine Recon. Man, he was a big dude. And you go through what's that first week is just like I said, it's an in-processing week, and you don't meet those drill instructors I just named off until week 2. And they march you to your barracks, from the holding barracks into the barracks that you're going to be in for the rest of your time there at boot camp. and they sit you down, and they have this process that goes through where the commanding officer comes out and he kind of describes what's going to go on, and he introduces you to your drill instructors that you'll have for the next 3 months, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's just yelling and screaming, and I learned a lot from him. And I had Staff Sergeant Gilbreth, the Marine Recon, was real tough. But I learned a lot of respect from him, because I probably should have physically prepared myself more for boot camp, worked out a little bit more, and so I had some troubles with like climbing ropes initially and stuff like that. He was always on me, and when I finally was able to make some of these progressions, you know, okay, now it's making sense why he's kicking me in my butt a lot and really being on me. So they really made a huge impression, to still remember their names. I mean, some people couldn't remember their drill instructors' names, but there's no doubt I'll never forget them.
Yeah. Did they pay special attention to you because you were military brat, or?
No, I was actually able to keep that hidden to the very end of boot camp, because I didn't want any special treatment. My dad being a colonel in the Army, I didn't want, like I said, I didn't want any special treatment. And they didn't know until right before graduation. They asked, if you're going to have parents that are going to be here, is there any, officers or anything like that? So towards the end is when I want to say it was a week or two before graduation, I said, yeah, my dad's a colonel in the Army and he may be here. He may not be, and he because of work he wasn't able to make it. But so they didn't know until the end.
Did you receive any specialized training?
In boot camp, no. That was, it's just your basic training. My specialized training didn't come until I got out of boot camp and went into, initially I was motor transport in the Marine Corps. And then when I got out of the Marines, I was an MP in the Army, and then a firefighter in the Air Force. So I got my specialized training later on through the different jobs that I went through.
Okay. What made you switch from MP to firefighter?
Well, when I got out of active duty, I was going to go in the Marine Corps Reserves, but looking long term into my, what I wanted to do when I actually, got a career, it was either a cop or firefighter. And the Marines didn't have MPs or firefighters in the reserves in Indianapolis. I ended up moving back to Indianapolis after I got out. So that's why I went initially into the MPs. Really didn't. It was a huge transition going from the Marines into the Army, and I really didn't like it. And so I got out of the Army, the Army National Guard, and I took a 2-year break, and just had my first child. My daughter was born, and I had bronchitis, and I couldn't get out of the bed. The doctor said, you just need to, you're contagious, you got a brand new daughter. So I was watching the military channel, and I got the itch to go back in. I'm thinking to myself, I'm wasting away retirement. And I was a volunteer firefighter at the time, and so I thought, well, heck, let's just see if there's any Air Force units. And I found one up in Fort Wayne that had a firefighter position open, and I just got into, that's how I ended up going in the Air Force as a firefighter. So I didn't have to really go through any training other than they took all my civilian training, and the only thing I had to actually go for school for was the crash rescue, the airport rescue part of it. So that was a 3-week course, and then I was fully trained and was able to act as a firefighter in the Air Force then. So.
Interesting. And next section is wartime service. Where did you serve?
Well, during Desert Storm, when Desert Storm started, I was in Lejeune in the Marines. Went over to Okinawa, Japan, right at the end of Desert Storm. We never went over, the unit I was with, we never went over to the desert for that, but we ended up on a couple humanitarian deployments that we were supposed to go to the desert, and then well, the first one was Operation Operation Sea Angel. Bangladesh had gotten hit by a typhoon, totally destroyed most of the country, and so we changed directions from the desert and went to Bangladesh to help rescue them. And then we ended up going, we left there, we're going to go back to Japan, and Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines blew up or erupted. And so we ended up going to Subic Naval Base in the Philippines to help rescue them. MPs, when I was in the Army, we didn't do anything. We didn't get deployed anywhere. And then in the Air Force, obviously 9/11 happened, and I ended up going over to Kuwait in 2010, and we were kind of a transition base in between for troops going over to either Iraq or Afghanistan, and so we kind of supported that operation. It was Operation Iraqi Freedom, and it's Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom is what that operation was.
Oh, wow. So you've done a lot of traveling and bounced around.
Seen a few countries.
Yeah. Do you like that aspect of it? Getting to see new places and
yeah, it was fun. I mean, obviously, in the air side of it, Air Force side, after 9/11, I'm married and kids, so it was a little bit tougher then. When I was in the Marines, I mean, obviously I had my family at home, mom, dad, 2 brothers, and back then, no internet, so it was, waiting by the payphone to call home, write letters. So it was a little bit rougher to a point. I mean, I always loved my family, obviously, and loved talking to them, but, having a wife and kids, it was different. You want to be home for them, but the nice thing about it was obviously you have FaceTime and Skype, and FaceTime was as popular, but Skype was there. So, I would, I would call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my time, and it would be like 7 in the morning, right before my daughter went to school, talk to them, and then I would get up at 4 in the morning, and it was like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and talk to them a little bit. So it made it a lot easier with Skype and all, modern technology.
Yeah. And how many children do you have?
2.
Okay.
Yeah. Got a 17-year-old and a 11-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you served abroad, what are some memories you have of that experience? Do you have any specific ones?
Oh, there's so many. I think my biggest memories of Okinawa was when we got deployed to Fiery Vigil and Sea Angel. Especially Sea Angel when we went to Bangladesh. I had never been to a third world country before. And when we landed and started taking all of our medical supplies and medical supplies and water purification units were the big thing that they really needed. And I've got a picture with a couple kids from Bangladesh. And initially, you know, I mean, I had sunglasses on. I took my sunglasses off, and these kids would, they took off running, and they were talking to whoever it was, mother or whoever. And she spoke decent English, and I said, why are they yelling and screaming and running away? And I remember vividly, she said, well, they said that you had devil eyes. They've never seen somebody with such light-colored eyes before. I was like, oh, okay. So that one kind of sticks in my brain pretty well. You know, and then we went from there, and like I said, we were supposed to go back to Japan, and the captain of the ship wanted to cross the equator. So we went down to Thailand for a little R&R, and we were just heading towards the equator when Mount Pinatubo blew up. And then to go to, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of a volcanic eruption, but to be there, it was like a dirty blizzard. About the best way to put it. And driving on ash was like it's just like driving on snow. So that was interesting. When I went over to the desert in 10, there's just, luckily we didn't see any combat. Kuwait was it's an allied base, if you will. So we didn't really have to worry a whole lot. I mean, obviously, you know, people try and sneak on and stuff like that, but we were pretty secure. But, you know, there were more fun memories of just things that we did. I mean, we built a sand volleyball pit behind one of our fire stations, and put a nice grill out there, and you know, we made the best of it.
Yeah.
Made the best of our time there.
Oh. When you say driving on ash was driving on snow, it was like slick and you could slide it. Wow.
Yeah. It was really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to look at the buildings, you know, obviously ash is a lot heavier than snow, but you know, just it looked like they'd had a blizzard there, and just buildings collapsed in from the weight of the ash, and yeah, it was pretty weird.
Yeah.
And then Subic Bay was a beautiful port before the volcano blew up, and of course the town was obviously it was a naval town, so you know you had all kinds of bars and things, and they didn't spend much time. They didn't really fool around. Once they run bars off of generators, and once they got things up and running, I mean you could go out to a bar and get a drink after your work day, and you know, you're out there, you're dancing, playing around, and you could always tell when the generator ran out of fuel because the lights would dim down. About 5 minutes later, after they filled it back up, the lights would come back on. And it was different. Yeah. You know, it was. Of course, you know, at that time I had been 18, 19 at that time, so still fresh into life and not really, you know, like I said, it was the first time I'd been to a third world country, and it was different.
Yeah. Wild. And I should have let off. If you ever want me to turn off the camera, or if you don't want to answer these, feel free just to skip over. If you were on the front lines, what combat action did you witness?
I didn't.
Okay. Coming over that. What kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving, and with whom?
Oh, I've got lifelong friends from all the services.
Do any of them live in this area, or are they kind of spread out? You know?
They're spread out. When I lived in southern Indiana right before I moved here a couple years ago, I ran into, there was a sheriff's deputy, and we were at a Veterans Day celebration, and he had mentioned about serving in Marine Barracks, D.C. And I said, really, when were you there? and it turns out we were there at the same time. And I vaguely remember bumping into him, but so you run into people all around where we served in the same locations. A lot of the guys I served with in the Marines, I've lost track of some of them. The majority of the closest friends I've got were from my Air Force time in the Air Guard, and we still ride motorcycles together. And even though they live in Indiana and Ohio, we'll get together, and we've been in. Well, they weren't my wedding, but I've been in all their weddings. So it's a lifelong friendship.
Yeah, I can see that. What kind of bike do you have?
I've got a Harley Davidson. I've got one of the big, it's an ultra classic big dresser bike.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, oh yeah.
My brother just bought an Indian, and I'm like really jealous of it. Brand new.
Beautiful bikes.
Yeah,
beautiful bikes.
It was his treat to himself from getting back from deployment.
Oh sure.
Yeah. How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home? Talked about Skype, but maybe before that.
Well, and that was, like I said, back in my Marine Corps time, it was all phone call, writing letters. I've still got some letters, more on, stacked away that I'll never throw away from my mom, dad, and grandparents and stuff. I said, you're waiting on a phone to open up, and then pay phone to open up. So that was Christmas time, and the holidays would be a line, and you're just kind of all standing around waiting, because especially over in Okinawa, I don't remember, I think it was 8-hour difference or something like that. So back then it was, and then of course you didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on, because you got a line of people behind you. So communications back then were a little bit rougher. Nowadays, with modern technology, it was nice. Like I said, with Skype. And the position that I was in when I was overseas, I had my own office, and actually my bedroom was connected to my office. So I'd get up, walk right in my office, and get on the computer. And so I had a little more. I wasn't necessarily waiting in a line for a computer to talk. I could just go right to my office and talk away. So that made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I can imagine. What did you do for recreation, or when you were off duty?
Over in Japan, Okinawa, it's 60 miles long and 30 miles wide. So you can literally drive the whole island in one day if you wanted to. The waters were crystal blue, so scuba diving and swimming were a big thing. I did my share of partying. We had, there was 8 or 9 bases on Okinawa. No, it wasn't that many. We had Foster. There was 5 Marine bases, an Air Force base on Okinawa, and we always, one base had country night on. If it was country night, we were going there, and so we did our share of partying. Over in the desert, we couldn't drink over in the desert. That was the rules of the basically Muslim religion. They allow us on base, or they allow us to do things. We could have fun, but you had to kind of follow the rules, because you didn't want to make the country mad, which was understandable. And they didn't allow drinking, so we couldn't have anything like that. But we had, we built a beach volleyball pit behind one of our fire stations. They had a lot of USO tours. I met the cast of Sons of Anarchy.
That's pretty cool.
When I was over there in 10, that was cool. They have, I'm trying to make, a couple country singers came over. So I mean, we had things to do. The barbecuing, again, we had to kind of watch, because with the country's rules of what Muslims can eat and such, they allowed us one day a year to where we could do where we smoke a hog and have a big hog roast kind of thing. So one day we thought, well, I wonder if they'll let us do a lamb, and they did. So we ended up smoking a lamb, had a big feed for all the firefighters and police and EMS workers, and did a lamb smoke. That was kind of cool.
Wow.
So we made the best of it.
How much would you say you got to spend time with like locals and getting to know the area, or were you mostly just on base with other military?
The air base that we were on, Ali Salim, was technically a joint base. They had Kuwaiti Army was there, and they had, I can't really go into what they had there, but one of the things that I did do jointly was they had a Kuwaiti fire department there. So we did some joint training with their firefighters and ours. And went over, I had took the translator, and the day of one of our first trainings with them, and took the translator, and we went to pick up my counterpart, their deputy fire chief. And went over to the fire station, and it was a different world as far as their views on firefighting and how they do things. But we walked in just to basically go in and get the deputy chief, and then we were going to have a meeting, and they invited me in, and we sat down. We were there for probably an hour just talking, and they put a plate of dates out, and then brought out what ended up being chai tea. And I had never had that before. And there's a difference between the chai here in the States and actual there. And so they pour me a cup, and I'd have some dates. And I was never a big date eater either, but in foreign relations, you don't want to turn down things. So I'll give it a try. I'm eating the dates and drinking my tea, and I put my glass down, and they're filling it back up. And then we're just kind of discussing what's going to go on in training, and they were asking me some questions that, what it's like to be in the country and stuff. We had a really good conversation, and the translator leaned over to me and says, anytime you don't want any more tea, just make sure you turn your cup upside down. And that's the correct way of saying that you're done, or they'll sit there and do that all day long. So that was kind of neat. I had never been in a situation like that, and we were all sitting on the floor. There were no chairs, so it was different, but it was neat. I really enjoyed that part of it, and I'm glad that, because I initially was just going to send the translator over. Hey, we're going to go pick up my counterpart, and I thought, yeah, I'll go over there and just see what it's like. So it was neat. It was neat to be able to do that, and have a little foreign relations of my own, so to speak.
Yeah, that's cool. How did you return home?
We were all commercial air. We didn't take any military air. So they just piled us on a big commercial aircraft and brought us back over.
Did you guys have like the whole aircraft?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
Yep. Going over, they put all the senior enlisted and officers up in first class, and coming back it was find a seat. So, okay.
How were you received by your family and community when you came home?
It was a great return home. We flew into Baltimore, and then went from Baltimore. The next day we took a flight to Fort Wayne, Indiana. We had to in-process, and then I lived in southern Indiana, in Evansville at the time. So I had to take a flight from Fort Wayne into Evansville, and had a nice reception. Patriot Guard was out there. Initially, my wife had my motorcycle there. She had someone ride it over and was going to have me ride it, coming home, but it was just terrible rain.
Oh.
And so I ended up having to go back and pick the motorcycle up the next day. But we had people out there riding in the rain, bringing me home. So it was pretty neat.
Nice. How did you readjust to civilian life?
Overall, okay. I had some rough times. Even though I didn't see any combat, what I did see over there, I had some stuff that stuck with me. I wouldn't say true post-traumatic syndrome, but it was close. So I did have a little counseling, just kind of some readjustment kind of stuff, and it definitely helped me out.
That's good. Have you remained in contact with or reunited with fellow veterans?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
It's especially the guys that I, was over in the desert with. Like I said, we're lifelong friends. I've been in all their weddings and stuff, so we're pretty tight.
Yeah. And are you a member of any veterans organizations, and if so, which?
Yeah, American Legion.
Yeah. And what have you done since separating from the military?
I retired January 16.
Of this year?
No, 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. And with after my dad retired, right, and basically passed away, the adjutant, state adjutant, COO basically, he had asked me if I'd be interested in taking a spot that could potentially put me in line to be the adjutant one day. And so I basically said sure, because that a legacy of where my father was. So that's how I ended up back here.
Okay. Would you recommend the military to your children?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Are they interested in it, or too young to tell? Or?
My son's too young right now, really, to tell. My daughter is actually considering it. She's huge in the choir, show choir kind of thing. And all the services have different bands, vocal groups, that kind of thing. And the Air Force, I actually, while I was over in Kuwait this last time, they had sent over on a USO tour a group. It wasn't the full Air Force band, but what they were is basically from DC. They're part of the Presidential Air Force band, is the best way to put it. And so I, thanks to Facebook, have kept up with a couple of them, and I've sent them video of my daughter singing, and they're interested in her. Now she's kind of on some days she wants to do it, some days she doesn't. So I'm not going to pressure any of my kids into it, just like my father did me. He was, if you want to do it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. So I would like to see my kids keep up the military legacy, but if they don't, then no problem.
Oh. And your daughter's a senior in high school?
She will be. She's junior right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so she still has some time.
Yeah.
To think about it.
Yep.
Okay. Then last section is reflections. How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
Well, it makes you appreciate what we have here in the U.S. Going to the different third world countries that I've been to, going to the desert, You know, it makes you appreciate what we've got here. Even just in Kuwait, knowing their culture, having learned their culture and what they can do, what they can't do, makes you appreciate the freedoms that we've got here. You know, it's just, you know, I'm proud to serve, and you know, if they call me back, I would go back. Now, because of injuries I've sustained over there when I was over in the desert the last time, I'm what they consider non-deployable. So if they were to call me back, I'd have to stay here in the States. I couldn't go back overseas, but you know, I would definitely do it if they asked me to. But you know, it's to look back on like the Vietnam veterans and hearing my dad talk. He would talk about how when he came home, you know, there was nothing. There was no parades, spit on and stuff like that, you know. And so to see a total reversal of people welcoming us home when we came home was good to see. And I just hope that we can continue that. I know being over there isn't a popular thing for some people, and you know, you can look either way on the political side, and we're over there for a reason. We're trying to get those terrorists that want to change our lives. And unfortunately, in some cases, they have changed our lives in the way we do things now. But, yeah, I wouldn't have changed anything. It's proud to do what I've done and been where I've been. So hopefully, like I said, we can keep that up. And like I said, my kids want to follow where I've been, then great, and if not, then that's fine.
That's always good to hear.
Yeah.
You feel good about it?
Oh, yeah.
What are some life lessons you learned from the military?
Respect for all cultures. You know, I hate to see on Facebook where people are posting, well, because they're this religion or that religion, this has happened, and all of this religion is bad, and unfortunately some of them are from some people that have been in the military. But you know, to look at it with an open mind, you know, everybody's different, and just because you're of one religion or race doesn't make you a bad person. There's good people in all religions and races. So you know, I've learned respect for everybody. And, you know, obviously they break your trust. Well, that's something different. But leadership, I've learned a ton about leadership and the positions that I've been put in. Knowing that I'm putting people in harm's way is tough. But one thing that I prided myself on and proved to my guys is that if I'm telling you to go into this situation, I'm either going to be in front of you or right next to you. So I think the military definitely helped me with leadership in that aspect of it. Yeah, there's just organization. You know, there's just so much that I've learned from the military that what I have learned from college, even though I did go to college afterwards. I had more real life experiences in what the military taught me than I think the college may not have beat into my head as much. Excuse me, as much as the military did.
How has military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I mean, you're trained in the military to go to war. No one wants to go to war. I'm sure can't say no one, because I'm sure there are probably those, quote, warmongers out there. But, you know, when I went in, it was the end of the Cold War, and, you know, we were trained that if something ever broke out, you know, this is what we would have to do. Yeah, never in my lifetime would have thought that we were gonna end up in the desert and, you know, with all the stuff that happened. But, you know, we got real, see, I graduated boot camp May 18th of 90, and Desert Storm started, well, Desert Shield started, is it August? Yeah, August of 90. So I had a couple months of, okay, yeah, we're, you know, I'm just going to do my time and hopefully never go to war, to, oh, wow, you know, this is building up quick. And I'll never forget, I had some good friends when I was at Naval Little Creek Amphibious Base in Virginia doing some training, and within probably 12 hours of Iraq invading Kuwait, they disappeared. And I knew exactly where they were because of what they did. And so I thought, okay, yeah, this is a no crapper. We're heading to possibly war. And then obviously in January '91, you know, Desert Storm hit. So I don't have the right word is a bad outlook on war per se. I mean, obviously, we'll probably never come out of the Middle East, unfortunately. I would hope so, but I don't see it happening. And obviously, you know, talking to my wife, you know, she doesn't want I mean, I was talking to my daughter about going to the Marine Corps, and she's like, oh no. I don't want her going overseas. I'm like, well, if she goes overseas, she can go overseas in the Air Force. But it's there, unfortunately, and we're there to protect our country. And like I told you earlier, you know, if I got called back up, I'd be right there. So, you know, no one wants to go to war. I don't want to go to war, but if it happens, it happens, and that's why the military is there, is to protect us, to protect our allies. You know, if we have to go to war, then fine. You know, my daughter's questioned me about North Korea a lot, and you know, I told her I think it's more what they call saber rattling. You know, North Korea is just trying to puff out their chest a little bit and to look overall in the big picture, and I just can't see North Korea doing anything. But if they do, they do, and that's what we're here for, is protect our allies and protect our country from, you know, being invaded and having people take over like, you know, the Nazi Germany did, you know, back in World War II. That's what the military is there for. When you go in, you know that there is that possibility. Obviously now, when you go in, it's pretty much a guarantee that you're going to see some overseas time of some sort over in the desert. You know, when I went in, it was, you may get deployed over, you know, to Japan or Europe or something like that, just go into a base, and then 3 months later to think, okay, now we're looking at maybe something else. So it's part of the job.
When did you get deployed for Desert Storm? Like, how soon after boot camp?
Let's see, when did I go over to Japan? I went over there, we were on the aircraft going over to Okinawa the day they launched Desert Storm. So when we landed, we had heard about the invasion and all that, and it was just kind of, okay, you know, all the units are spinning up, you know, they call spinning up, getting ready to deploy if needed. And so once I got to Japan, it was, welcome to Japan, here's your job, now this is what you need to do to help us get ready in case we got to go. And then obviously, you know, the war ended real quick. Desert Storm did. So we, as quick as we got ready, then it was, okay, we can stand down a little bit. And then we end up going over, like I said, to those humanitarian efforts, basically loaded for war, but we had more humanitarian stuff on, so that's why they sent us to Bangladesh and the Philippines when they did. So.
Okay. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
I really hope that future generations will keep the American pride up and not let politics get in the way. You know, this country was founded on by warriors who, you know, they didn't want to be oppressed. You know, Washington, General Washington, President Washington, you know, he's built up the military, and he told the British that by force, we're not going to stand for this anymore. And that's why we are today, as free as we are. And unfortunately, you've got politicians on both the left and the right that either want to push this or want to push that agenda. But to keep the American pride, we have to have the military to keep our way of life. And, you know, while I don't necessarily think that, well, I do think that everybody should spend some time in the military, because if nothing else, just to give them a different view of why we are free. You know, Israel has a great program. Everybody does at least 2 years, and then if you want to continue on, you can. And then Israel's not the only country that does. There's a couple other countries, but I think it's good. If nothing else, go to boot camp. You learn a little bit of discipline, learn some leadership, and I think that helps people grow up a little bit. So, you know, for future generations, we have to keep our military. We have to keep it ready to go if something else breaks out somewhere in the world, or if they try and break out over here like they did in 9/11. You know, that was a wake-up call, and things have changed for the good because of that. Some for the bad, depending on how you look at it. But the military needs to stay, and they need to stay fully staffed and ready to go. And we just need people to grow up and go into those military positions. And, you know, my job, I always told my guys that I'm training you to take my spot when I leave. And so whatever I can do to pass that on is what I did. And I never held anybody back, never, you know, I could have stayed in longer, but that just been holding up somebody else from moving up into the higher positions that I had. So to stick true to myself, stick true to my word, that's why I got out. So, and I was ready to get out. So, but yeah, keep the military tradition moving on.
And is there anything you feel we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview? And if so, what?
Not that I can think of, although I want to go back to, you asked about my drill instructors and remembering them. When, let's see, I got to Washington, D.C., I was in my third year in the Marine Corps. I went to Washington, D.C. Marine Barracks. It's the ceremonial, it's where the silent drill team's at. And we did a lot of presidential support there. That was one of my jobs, was presidential support. And we were doing, I was working security. Every Friday in the summertime, the Marine Barracks has, they call it Sunset Parade. And it's the silent drill team, the drum bugle corps, the president's own band. And they have a very ceremonial production there at the base. And we have visitors come in from all over the world to see it, and it's a great experience if you're ever out there in DC. Well, anyways, I was working security out on the street, and I see these military buses pull up, and we'd always have the officer candidate school from Quantico every year would come up, and they'd bring their cadets up or recruits, and they'd watch the parade. And it's kind of a recruiting motivational tool for them. Well, I'm just working security, walking up and down the street, and I see the bus come up, and I kind of turned my back because I was looking at something else, and all of a sudden I heard this drill instructor start yelling, and I almost wanted to drop down. I had goosebumps on my arms because I knew that voice. And sure enough, Sergeant Meekins, one of my drill instructors, was now a gunnery sergeant, and he was a drill instructor for the OCS recruits. And so after, I spun around, and I'm like, oh my God, I know that voice. I almost wanted to drop down and do push-ups just and so after he was done forming up his OCS recruits, I walked over to him, and I was a corporal at the time at E4, and I said, Gunnery Sergeant Meekins. He spun around, and he's like, oh my goodness, you've come a long way. So I said, yeah, Gunny, I have. And then he made a big deal about it with his recruits. One day you can be a Marine. This Marine right here, he was one of the ones that I was his drill instructor, and now he's a proud Marine, and so he made a big deal out of it. But that was pretty neat to have. Like I said, I had a quick boot camp flashback when I heard that voice. It was just one of those voices that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
So that was kind of neat. But I think I really appreciate you guys for doing this interview. My wife's been on me for a while to do something like this because there's been a couple opportunities for this, but I've just never really had time to really get into it. But I think you guys are doing a great service for veterans, and appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I think that's everything.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.